Hi, Rich Karuba for bowlingball.com. Many of you want to learn a little bit more about how to keep the surface of your bowling ball prepared for use, how often you should clean or polish your bowling ball, get it into the pro shop and screen it, or do some of the screening yourself with grit pads that you might own. So what I wanted to do, we drafted an article that gives you pretty comprehensive information about it at Bowlversity section of our site. In fact, you had to scroll down below it to find this video you're watching. So if you read the article and refer to it, it'll give you the specifics. But let me go through them quickly. Number one, here's a simple chart alerting you when to perform surface maintenance to your bowling ball equipment. Number one, repolish shiny bowling balls and scuff your dull bowling balls after about 10 games of bowling. 10 games. You can do it with your hand polish, with your own pad or towel, microfiber towel, and your own polish that's cleared for use in competition by USBC, by the way. Number two, you want to scuff and repolish shiny bowling balls after 30 games of bowling. Okay? So after 30 games, you scuff and you repolish your shiny bowling balls, your pearl cover stock, and prepare them for the next 30 games of use. And number three, a full resurface or rescreening job is really needed, and replacing finger inserts, if you use those, they should be replaced after 60 games of bowling. Now obviously 60 games, if you bowl 3 leagues a week, that's about 9 games that you're bowling. So in 2 months time you'll be ready. If you practice, less time on a given bowling ball. So you might want to track or get your own little chart if you have several bowling balls and keep track of how many games you bowl. That'll give you an indicator how to perform the maintenance. Next are some other useful combinations to prepare the cover stock of your bowling balls, and to combat different lane conditions that you encounter. And courtesy of Storm Products, we were given this information. For 500 grit surface prepared bowling balls, you want to expect a reaction to cause the ball to read the lane extremely early. This is good in heavy volumes of oil, 500 grit. When you use a 360 grit, even lower grit yet, but then go over it, a second treatment with a 1000 grit pad, that reaction gives you a little more length than the 500 grit alone, but still has significant ability to generate friction and heavier oil. And of course 500 and then a 2000 grit preparation over the top of that, it's a good benchmark ball reaction. The ball has enough topography, we call it, to generate enough friction on medium to lighter oil conditions, and good enough to cause the ball to not read the lane too early in most cases. The finish on the 2000 delay finish delays the transition on the back end, allows for a pretty good angle of entry from the break point to the pocket. That's 500, 2000 grit. And finally, Storm suggests a 500 grit with a 4000 grit over the top of it, a very fine grit use over the 500 grit aggressive pad. This reaction works extremely well on multiple patterns, as you might expect. It makes the ball easy through the front end, a subtle but noticeable reaction on the mid lane, and then of course it has an enormous amount of friction left for the back end of the lane. And it can generate some of the strongest angles of entry possible on fresh patterns. But they may start to skid too far as the pattern carries down the lane. Now, these are general preparations for the surfaces, and they'll work for most bowling balls, certainly on the Storm line. And Brunswick gave us a few tips too, to reduce, for example, on Brunswick equipment, you can reduce oil absorption, clean your ball cover stock with a ball cleaner every time you get done using it. That's a simple technique that'll help you. You can do it yourself. Number two, if you think your ball's lost some of its out-of-the-box reaction from just use on the lanes, restore the ball to its original factory finish. And it's especially important for balls that are highly sanded or the other end of the spectrum, highly polished. Sand to 400 grit, and then use maybe a high gloss bowling ball polish to restore the original factory finish on a high gloss polished ball cover stock. You might want to sand to 220 grit and then use a high grit texture polish to restore the original factory finish on rough buff balls. Okay? So you want to use your head. You want to try to get that ball restored to its factory finish and tweak it just enough to match up to your way of releasing the ball in lane conditions you encounter most frequently. Next, Brunswick says if there's a visible track on your ball, ask your pro shop to refinish the ball using some kind of resurfacing system. If you don't own one yourself, most people don't, get into the pro shop and let them work on it for you. They can also remove some of the oil by rejuvenating or using some kind of reviver type device. It sucks the oil out of the cover stock of the ball and It'll help that become a little bit more responsive on the lanes. And Brunswick's testing is shown by combining the restoration of a factory finish and resurfacing of the ball track and oil removal. Your ball can maintain its original out-of-the-box reaction for hundreds and hundreds of games. Okay? Don't use a home oven to remove oil. We don't recommend it. People do it. They swear by it. But temperatures cannot be adequately controlled, and the ball might crack. The plaster sizes in a ball might dry up in the cover stock, and it might affect ball reaction. If you want to take the chance, do so on your own volition, but you've been warned. Next, finally, Brunswick suggests absorbent materials sold by other bowling ball manufacturers to remove oil can be used on Brunswick bowling balls. So information to date indicates that these absorbent materials have a more limited ability to remove oil than warming the ball. So the Reviver or the Rejuvenator is still the best way to get oil soaked out of your bowling ball. You may be disappointed with results on heavily soaked oil bowling balls, so even more reason to get into the pro shop, get the ball in the high-speed screening, the spinner, and screen it. Restore the factory finish through the procedures you need using a variety of grip pads, and then get that ball ready for use so it resembles out-of-the-box factory finishes. Now there's other types of mediums that you can use and grit pads available to do a lot of the work yourself. What we recommend you do is start trusting your pro shop professional locally and get in the habit of having a regular surface maintenance to your bowling ball so you can depend on it through the course of your entire bowling season. Hope some of these tips help you. We have an article that discusses it in a little more detail. We thank you for your time.